All right, so hello everybody. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. This is the our monthly Hedera Meetup, hosted by myself and the Creative Coast out of Savannah, Georgia. Creative Coast is an organization started for entrepreneurs here in the lowlands, the coastal area part of Georgia. Essentially, their goal is to code, create, and collide, and they've been helping Ledgerama out really since very early on. Really, right after I competed in the Hedera 18 hackathon, I took the presentation that I gave at the Hedera 18 hackathon and then presented it to the crew over at Creative Coast. And the director of the Creative Coast, Jen Bonet, who's like I had said, she's been really there, kind of helping and guiding me through my journey and process as an entrepreneur. She pulled me aside right after I gave the presentation and kindly said, "We should talk. I liked your presentation." So she was happy to host the Hedera Meetups. We've been doing this, like I said, since late 2018. Has pretty much always been there with me as well. He used to be our executive chef, and now he's
good food.
It was good food, man.
Yes,
we ate well every week, and so now, of course, things are relegated to virtual, so we can virtually watch Rob eat food, but that's about as good as it's going to get. No, so appreciate everybody joining us. So yeah, Ledgerama is a cryptocurrency company. Basically, we in the past year, we've been knee deep in building a wallet. The wallet's called Walla Wallet. It's there to support HBAR users, and we jumped in to fill a gap in the Hedera ecosystem. There was a much needed there was a big need for a fully supported wallet, and so we've been there doing that. Once the Hedera wallet went away, there was a big need for that, and we've got big dreams and big visions. But the wallet was a good place for us to start. Kind of gave us an opportunity to cut our teeth in the technology and ingratiate ourselves to the HBAR community. And so this week, I asked. So I had been in conversation with our guest here, Braden, over the past month or so, and he's interested in truth and trustworthiness, and media is one of his areas of focus, and it's something that both my partner and I are very interested in as well. So I figured it'd be a good conversation to have. Could be some fun, and so away we go. So Braden, if you would just briefly kind of give a little bit on your background, and the typical dog and pony show, how you came into Hashgraph and what your background is.
Yeah, so I read I got into Bitcoin originally back in like 2010. I was doing my master's in computer engineering, and the paper was floating around. Everyone got excited. We all mined some Bitcoins on CPUs when you could mine like 10 a day. Lost the hard drive before the hard drive died before they were worth anything. Didn't think about it again for like 3 or 4 years, and then obviously I'm mad that I lost hundreds of Bitcoin. But later on, during my PhD, computer engineering, I stumbled across the Hashgraph paper, not like the white paper for Hedera, but just the technical paper on the consensus algorithm. And I didn't think it was too good to be true. It was one of those things where you read enough papers as an academic and everyone's lying to you about how good their thing is.
Sure.
I kind of stopped doing my actual research for 6 weeks, like 2 months, something like that. And I was just doing the lit review on consensus and Byzantine fault tolerance and trying to get into that. That was not my area of expertise. And I came to the conclusion that this was actually legitimate, and Lehman was legitimate, and this was as good as it sounded. And I've sort of been Hedera maximalist ever since. Obviously, so I've been, even since before Hedera was Hedera, it was pretty clear he was going to make a public ledger with this. So that's kind of where I started. I hope to eventually be proven right in that bet. It's been like everyone else who likes Hedera. That's been hard the last, let's say, year, but that's where we are. And what I'm kind of doing right now is I was supposed to go work at Uber doing some self-driving car stuff. COVID hit, that move got canceled, and I started doing some kind of consulting in the blockchain space for various companies. And my sort of main gig right now is helping do wallet recovery for people who have had crypto locked. So this is kind of passwords for BIP 38 encrypted sort of wallets, which could be Ethereum, Doge, a bunch of other kind of coins, as well as various kind of seed word recovery when you don't have some of your seed words, or maybe you mistype something, things like that. Right. But what I've been starting to think about now, what's kind of brought us here, is I'm talking to kind of a couple clients, advising a couple of businesses right now on this broader picture. I'm hearing a lot of people, to talk about how there's an issue with the media landscape. There's an issue with truth. There's an issue with just, no one knows what to believe anymore on the internet. And that the institutions that were in, that Eric Weinstein would say are supposed to be involved in sense making have completely failed. And this is destabilizing society, like to put it, I think, as precisely as I can. And this is not necessarily the fault. I don't want to put malice on, these organizations, the typical, news outlets. I think that they're responding to incentives that have come about through forces that were unrelated to them, on, revenue going down because of digital media, because of computer science and data science just improving in its power. And the more things that are transacting online, the more logs there are of what's happened, the more analytics you can have, the more optimization you can do around what's getting clicks, not getting clicks, right? And I think it's been in everyone's local kind of greedy in the computer science term, but like in their local interest to make the decisions they're making. But the result is a world in which, big cultural events that people have opinions on, they don't know anything about. And perhaps the best example in the current media, right, is the Kyle Rittenhouse, trial, and just how many, both people on the right, people on the left, mainstream CNN, Fox News, YouTubers, a David Pakman on the left or Steven Crowder on the right, like in the last week, have come to some realization about some fact that they were totally wrong about, for which there were 17 angles of video footage the night that it came out 10 months ago. Right. And it's like that disconnect, like there's a problem there somewhere. These are people whose job it is to know, let alone you're having a conversation with, your parents or whatever, and your friends. And where I see this as being a problem, kind of a huge problem, is.
Well, hold on, Braden. Hold on. Before we get into the huge problem, I just want to kind of set the stage just a little bit, because you're speaking my language here. But just to set the stage, I did a little bit of. So I used to work when I was younger, right out of high school. I worked for Gallup Poll for a little while. I was one of those annoying kids that called you on the phone and and asking you we did the political surveys. I mean, we did everything from surveys about Disneyland and Busch beer all the way up to the political surveys, Firestone tires, all kinds of stuff. But the political surveys and the technology surveys tended to be the most fun. So I like to look at Gallup poll and kind of see what they're saying about some of the big topics. So currently, America is in a big slump. We are in the second lowest period of trust in media in the history of the country. And the last time wasn't that long ago. It was in 2016 when we were in a slightly lower trough of trust, right? So we are down in the valley here, and it's only like a percentage point off. So we are basically in the lowest point of trust in media in our country's history. So 36% of the country feels that there is at least a fair amount of trust in the media. Right. So it was
that's to be expected. No matter how you could get up and say every day that you're lying and tell I'm lying about this, right? But if you have cultural influence and you're saying something that's in the direction of something some population sort of wants, some people are going to let that slide, right? So that's not, there's always going to be whoever's winning, right, is going to be doing things that you like. There's going to be that's fine, right? And that's kind of a human bias that's, very few people, myself included, are not above, that bias. And so like with many kind of highbrow conversations about decentralization and crypto, it's, well, how can you systematically try to remove that bias? How can you set up a system for which you're not in control of making some of those bad decisions with regard to how you're going to promote something or how you're going to discuss something? And if you can do that, that'd probably be good for the world, I would say, in a way that the incentives just don't align right now. And I'm sure we'll talk about that as the talk.
Right. So the numbers, 9% feel that there's a great deal of trust, that they trust the media a great deal. 27% a fair amount of trust. 34% have none at all. 34%.
Yeah,
almost equal to the number that
yeah,
think that there's a fair amount, think that there's none at all,
none at all.
and then 29% think that there's not very much. So historically, basically the data doesn't go back that far for the US, which I think probably means it doesn't go back very far for the world in general. But in the 70s, we had pretty good level of trust, and it's kind of it was in the 70s, it was right around 70%. So we had a fair amount of trust in the media in the 70s. 90s it dropped to 55% approximately, and then but ever since 2003 it has been below 50%. So since 2003 it has not once got back up above 50% trust in the media. And I look back at what was happening in 2001, 2002, 2003, particularly in 2003 with the weapons of mass destruction, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that was a big one. They pounded on the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq for years, right? After 9/11, I mean, they were pounding on that and pounding on it. And then finally it came out that there wasn't any weapons of mass destructions, or at least that they came out and they said they couldn't find them. I've heard people in the middle, I've had friends in the military that said, no, there was weapons of mass destruction there. Other folks saying, so at any rate, but the media came out and said we couldn't find anything. And George W. Bush was even on camera at some dinner. He's all dressed up in his tuxedo, right? And they're asking him, he makes a joke. He said, well, we haven't found any weapons of mass destruction, and maybe they're under here. And he's looking under his podium, and of course, the people in the audience are ha 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 ha, right? Weapons of mass destruction. But anyway, so
yeah. So I think the digital age has brought with it, I think, some optimizations that are sort of bad for society around. Let's test what color of blue promotes the most, endorphins in people, and make sure your color's that when all this deception and perception things. But it also provides more nuggets and breadcrumbs and data trails around making it more difficult to outright lie, right? And so I feel like in the last, the weapon mass destruction is a great one in which, there just isn't. No one could produce evidence. There should have been documents on many levels of the intelligence agencies describing this. There should be evidence around it. We should, so all these things that could or should have come up that should have left the digital trails that just didn't exist. And of course, against everyone now kind of admits that, it was basically a hoax. And in the last 20 years, there's been, people are leveraging one side of that equation, to try to control the narrative and control people think, without leveraging the other side, which is that, we can have a million eyes on all of these problems now. And they have actually been good at spotting when things are bad, but there hasn't been an economic or social mechanism for which to promote those voices when they stumble onto something. And that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to think about is there's been people who have been kidnapped, who got saved because people on Reddit were analyzing the sun patterns in a photo, and figuring out that it was in Kansas. Those aren't jokes, right? And because there's people that have kind of skills everywhere. But how do you make that? And I see this in in my news consumption is kind of a joke now. That's like the difference between a conspiracy theory and fact is 9 months, right? You look at the COVID, fiasco for the last 18 months. And I see you go deep down the rabbit hole of the internet on any topic, and you find dozens, hundreds of very intelligent people going over every line of every document in a legal case, in a Pfizer contract, in whatever. And they're spending the hours and hours and hours to find that nugget. They craft an argument that sort of ends up they have influence to talk to people that are a little bit bigger than them, right? They can't talk to someone who has 10 million followers, but they're in the chats and talking to people that are a little bit bigger, and it's a good idea. And then they start having the conversation at that kind of 10,000 subscriber level. And then the good ideas from those propagate up to the 100,000 subscriber level, then the million subscriber level. And then suddenly gets to a point where everyone on the internet knows something's true or not true. And finally the media has to say, okay, well, maybe this, in Canada, this just happened. Okay, well, maybe there's these vaccines are causing some heart issues in young men. So we're going to recommend not having in Ontario, anywhere where I'm from, we're going to recommend not having the Moderna one for people of this age, right? And it's like that. There's this, what happened in that gap of 12 months where the data almost clearly showed this was a problem, to 12 months later or so, when finally you could get someone to say, okay, yeah, we were wrong on this, we're going to make some changes. And so you want to both speed up that process, but also whoever's doing the legwork and spending the time and digging this stuff up and actually going through like each figure of these reports and constructing their graphs and doing it, like we've got to find a way for them to get paid. You know what I mean? For that to be a legitimate career when they're right, and for people to be able to form reputations around making the right calls, not being able to lie and say they didn't make that call, or that. And I think the most important in the way we're thinking about this is to make it more financially incentivized to change your mind when you are wrong than to stick to your guns. So
wow.
you want it to be the most incentivized to just get it right, to not enter until you think you actually know the answer, right? But if you do enter, right, how do you make a system kind of game theoretically, tokenomics, like economically, such that when new evidence presents itself, you're either going to lose less money or like make not make as much money, but to say, oh, actually, like this evidence came out, like this convinced me, like I'm switching over to side B. That's kind of what some of the requirements for how we're thinking about how we might want to take a crack at this problem. Because the one thing I say at the outset, I usually say at the beginning when I'm talking about this is, I know, and the thing I talked to the couple companies who are really trying to dig deep into this, it's like, we're not going to solve truth. I'm not going to solve truth. It's not possible to solve truth, right? But the world can be better than it is now. And there are kind of baby steps you can take, I think, in a direction that will make people more honest and try to, what I call sort of the fourth wave of kind of cryptocurrency and blockchain, which is externalizing the trust that's on the chain kind of out into the world.
Right.
This is kind of Lehman's vision, I'd say the third wave is sort of the oracles. It's kind of the bringing of data from outside into the chain. And the fourth wave is kind of now responding to that data in a way that makes people in the outside world behave more ethically because they know that there's some things they can't change.
Right. Yeah. Getting that level of absolute truth. I mean, that, I could see the difficulty in that, but at least moving the needle, because like you said, initially you could have people in the media flat out telling people that they're lying and people would still believe them. Right. So it doesn't, because there's there's certain instances where folks have just made up their minds one way or the other, right or wrong. They're not going to change their mind. Right. And so you just kind of want to be able to move the needle one way or the other. You mentioned something about sides, and I just kind of wanted to kind of throw a little twist out there as far as sides. It turns out that trust in the media is a very partisan issue. Listen to this: 68% of Democrats are in that fair amount to great deal of trust in the media, whereas only 11% of Republicans, right? And it's somewhere in the mid 20s to low 30s with the independents. But yeah, 11% Republicans versus 68% Democrats. That was shocking to me. Now the Dems are
I'm surprised it's that high for Republicans and that low for Democrats right now. Because I mean that's a perfectly explainable, predictable number, and it has nothing to do with the actual politics of the people. I mean, so some of these differences in these kind of polls, you can understand them in terms of the big five personality traits that tend to make a conservative or a Democrat, and how that might, from an evolutionary perspective, manifest in the world. But this one is just the people in the US and sort of Canada anyway, the people who are in control of the major media outlets are on one side of that equation. And the people that are not in control of that obviously have less trust in it because they're the ones that get censored more. When there's a gray area, they're the ones where it kind of falls on that side. And again, I think there is some nefarious things kind of going on, but you don't have to invoke anything nefarious to say, just we all live in bubbles. And like a trust and safety team at a social media company, they can only respond to the issues that they're aware of, right? So if you're reading left-wing, if some incident happened and a Democrat and a conservative both ran in, robbed an ice cream store, right? Well, if the left-hand media says conservative, this guy robs an ice cream store, and the right-wing media says leftist robs an ice cream store, if there's a policy on your social media site saying, look, you can't have people that are alleged to have committed ice cream theft, well, the person at the trust and safety team over at that thing, they're only going to read the story about the guy John Smith and not Sandy whoever, right? So like just the absence of even hearing the other side of the argument means even if you want it to be a perfectly fair, balanced, and arbiter of these kind of policies around social media, like you couldn't do it because you're not even aware of the ones that go against your side because the media is not telling you because they're trying to promote a narrative. Which is
interestingly, the number is down amongst Democrats, even though we're in a period where they have basically carte blanche control, they're still down about 5%. Yeah, so normally they're in the mid 70s as far as trust in the media, but we're all the way down to 68%. So trouble in Tinseltown. A lot of a lot of concern on the left, I think, currently. Also, just across the board, right now we're seeing trust in all three branches of government are down.
Yeah,
including the judicial branch, which typically
which is
the judicial branch has got
that's
a very
worrying.
high.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is very concerning.
and I think you're seeing this kind of politicization of everything, feed into these judicial reviews. And there's just so many, and I haven't done enough research on this to know whether we're just seeing more of the partisan judicial actions because of social media, or there actually is more. There's reason to believe that when it comes to like media or like Newsmet or whatever, I think it's pretty clearly a combination of both. 40 years ago, they were being more honest than they are today, but also when they lied, it was harder to get caught. Because there wasn't cell phone. If they said, if Walter Cronkite said this was happening in Korea, it's like, what are you going to do to verify that fact, right?
Yeah.
But I would suspect, just from a moral and ethics and kind of societal cohesion perspective, that they weren't actively going out of their way to lie in a way that people have been caught these days at the New York Times and at CNN and at Fox, like actively lying, right? Like, leaked emails where they know that was not true and said it anyway.
It's got to be difficult to be a journalist right now. What a terrible time
Absolutely.
to be a journalist, because your trust is just always constantly being questioned. That'd be really hard as a journalist.
Yep. And one of the great things that's happened recently, right, is the rise of Substack. This is not a kind of global, I think, fix. Substack being kind of a pay for newsletter, independent journalist type outlet. And so if you already have an audience, you can get your Substack. It's kind of keeping a lot of ideas kind of smaller, because from an economic perspective, once you can get 10,000, 20,000 followers to give you, $1 a month or $3 a month, you're sort of very incentivized at that point to kind of close down and make a paywall and, make your 20 grand a month, 30 grand a month when you do your writings. But we want to see, for us, a good outcome in the world would be one in which making good calls early and verifiably making good calls early could earn you reputation that can go across, whatever you do in various kind of media outlets. So, and this is independent of sort of who you are or what your accolades are or whatever, or even, you don't have to be KYC, you don't have to know who you are, but, there's definitely people in various topics that, I've come to trust. One that people may know of is, Brett Weinstein, with regards to the COVID stuff. I spent the mid to early 2000s or 2020s, when other than going crazy, and I'd verify. I spent 100 hours verifying sort of things that he had said in his podcast and reading papers and whatnot, because I'm an academic, I read a lot of papers. But there gets to a point where what he was saying was what I was interpreting from these same papers over and over and over and over again, to the point where I kind of cut him some slack now. But he doesn't have, and he comes back now and says, look, like all these things that we know are true now, that no one disagrees are true now. It's like, I said them on my podcast, 18 months ago, 17 months ago, 16 months ago. And having the ability to attest to a claim in a way that's verifiable, and to attest to when you changed your view, and if you did why, I think is very valuable, insofar as, I don't know about you guys, but when I have arguments with people about base facts of something, it's not about, does this make you a good person or what's the morality of whatever, but just, did in this thing we're discussing, was this guy holding a weapon or not? And it's like, no, he's unarmed. And I go, okay, like $50, $100, $200, what do I want to bet? Well, let's bet right now. We'll get, there's 3 friends with us having beers or whatever, I get back when you could do that. They can be the jury, right? 5 minutes to make a case, they'll decide, right? And you'd be amazed how quickly that stops people from continuing, right? Because it's like, there's 4-angle video footage of this guy holding a knife,
Right.
But they haven't gone to the first principles kind of research. And so I would want to see a system where you could financially incentivize people for producing evidence, but also in some sense, we're kind of talking about in this, again, a little over the place, we have a lot of ideas we're kind of throwing around with various people and trying to see what's going to fit where. But one of the ones I would like to see happen, if it's possible, and we're kind of in the process of figuring out if it's possible, is a betting market for events that have already occurred. So currently, there are betting markets on things that haven't occurred. Are the Lakers going to win Super Bowl? Will Trump win the election? You know, and these betting markets have been shown for even before the internet for many years to be a far closer reflection of reality than political pundits, than the news, than whatever, because there's money on the line.
Right.
And if you see some odds, you know, if you know something that I don't know, if you're a hedge fund guy that has satellite photos of the infrared spectrum of China, and you can tell that their energy usage has only gone up 3% last year, you know almost certainly their GDP did not go up 10% because GDP tracks very close to energy usage, right? And so if you're making a bet about, you know, the growth of China, you're using hard data and machine learning and data science and contacts to make these decisions. If you know something I don't know, you can make money, right? And so how do we bring the reason why I like this idea is because there's a lot of literature on the foundations for those betting markets and how to run them and what the payout should look like and the game theory around incentivizing, not lying. And so that's kind of a good basis to say, can we pull this back and say, well, can we apply this to things that the answer should already be known or could already be known, right? In whatever public incident, crime people are talking about these days, like was the person holding a weapon? Who struck who first? Was a racial epithet said, et cetera, et cetera. And I would expect that the hope would be in many of these cases, these are going to be pretty clear cut. There's going to be no betting action on this, right? Did someone ever walk on the moon, right? That there'll be not a lot of betting action on this because anyone who's going to disagree with that is not going to put money down, and there's clear evidence for this. But where you'll see some disagreement is places where the fact of the matter is that something did happen. If there was a fight, someone did strike first, let's say, but there has yet to have been uncovered evidence one way or the other that's convincing. And that might be a place for which if you do the research and you find the evidence, you find the timestamp from the live stream of some guy that was there that shows this, and you think it's a compelling case, then you can place a bet on the side that you now know the answer to, and you can present the evidence. That evidence could be timestamped, could be put on, on Filecoin, could be hashed and logged somewhere, et cetera, et cetera. Could be NFT'd potentially and sold later as being the evidence that kind of swung the tide, like the smoking gun in whatever case.
Right.
This could apply to whistleblowers, who it's like there's the betting market say 99% Pfizer was not experimenting on, children or whatever, in cages. And then some guy at Pfizer who has the video of them sticking children in cages or whatever, I'm not saying that happened, but like whatever it is, he now has a mechanism by which he can make 99 to 1 on his money by betting on himself and then, producing the evidence that it happened. And I would see that as being a plus for the world as well, to find a mechanism by which whistleblowers who are bringing verifiably true new facts to the world that go against what people believe to be true and has some cultural significance, there needs to be a way for which they can get set for life, because we want to incentivize that, especially in a world where more and more of your lives are going to be controlled by a fewer and fewer set of large companies. At least that's my view of sort of what's going forward. And it can't be the case now that you come out to Project Veritas and like hope you get $100,000 in a GoFundMe, right? But you're still taking a risk, because if the thing the evidence you provide is not actually that compelling, or it's not something that really people care too much about, then you're still going to screw up your life, for nothing. But like, you want there to be a mechanism to say, hey, yeah, like, when something really is a bombshell story, there should be a mechanism for you to make a lot of money.
Right. Yeah, and there's been a few of those within the past year that, just issues that in my mind were just settled issues, right? And then somebody came along and gave me a little piece of, information, whether it be a video or, some content, whatever it was. And then suddenly I went, oh, wow, we got to go back to this one. It's things that I just never would have thought, right? Like never in a million years.
Me too. Yeah. So no doubt about this, but there's obviously a lot of detail for like how you design such a system. And, one of the things with some of the people I'm working with, these are entrepreneur types. They have a lot of success, doing a lot of things. They're very excited. I'm kind of more let's pull it back to reality. What's the smallest piece that can get bit off that we can actually do?
Sure.
And so some of the conversations we're talking about more realistically right now is trying to get some of the base layer stuff that is the least subjective kind of out of the way. So I find that whenever we have the conversations about these events happening in the world, that it's such a waste of time having the argument over, was he holding a gun? when there's 5 versions of evidence. That the question should be, given he was or was not, is what happened good, not good? Did he break the law, not break the law? Like, there's kind of these higher level questions society's supposed to be having these conversations about.
Right.
And so you could think about a decentralized network around sort of fact checking, in which there's kind of a multi-layer process for sort of getting claims attached to a story. And so they might have to pass through a consensus network, like almost like a chain link style algorithm, to say, you know, is this claim a falsifiable claim? Yes or no, right? If you don't get consensus on that, the claim doesn't go in, right? What's the degree of subjectivity versus objectivity in such a claim? You know, if the results are too low, then it kind of goes back for review, and it's like, you got to resubmit it, right? As a, you know, something that's a more objective. Not, is he a good guy, but like,
right,
did he work at a soup kitchen on Wednesday nights, right? That's that statement that can take some of the language out of it.
Sure.
Is the answer, potentially we'd probably start with like, is there an acceptable answer in the form of a binary yes or no?
Right.
Because there's some questions where you could say yes or no, but it's not really a fair, you know, it'd be rough to answer that question yes or no.
Right.
And are there kind of clear conditions around, let's say, the language? Or is there any dispute about the language and the words, right? So, you know, Peter Schiff can say the economy is going to go down. And it's like, okay, well, like when, and like by how much? And like, you just can't say that forever. But these days we're seeing all these, you know, I get frustrated with kind of the Mott and Bailey around, in one conversation, someone uses the word critical race theory to mean X when it suits them, and they use the word critical race theory to mean something else. Oh, we're just talking about this. And then you see some other live stream of them with their own, you know, people, and they say something totally different. So an interesting thing to be, you know, so what do we mean when we say these words? Let's actually like build up a consensus around people voting or embedding and or submitting their consensus around that. And then at least when that's placed into the pool of things that can be sort of bet on, it goes like, you know, that there has been no dispute now about whatever there was dispute about, that got broken down, whatever dispute that got broken down. And we can get file up to say, what we mean is, you know, are there lessons being taught in schools in Tennessee in which, you know, this material is taught to people of these age? And that breakout might have started with like, is critical race theory being taught in the US, right? Which is an argument people have, doesn't get you anywhere. But when you break it all the way down to, are kids being segregated by race and being asked to say what their privilege is, that's an explicit statement for which someone could provide evidence for in the form of their kids, you know, itinerary and or videos from school or whatever it is. Because until you can agree on this kind of shared reality, like when there's no shared reality, when you can't even say like, look, you can think that's a great thing, right? That's a totally different topic than is something like, I can't believe we're at a stage where we can't agree, is something happening?
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable, really, given the state of technology that we're still in that place where we can't even agree on something as basic as whether something happened or not. When we look at, so I did want to jump into just a maybe kind of a cursory glance at the technology. So when I think of, so going back a few years, so when I think of you know, this reading the Gallup poll stuff made me think about 2016 and the elections in 2016, and there was it was really the first time I think that there was a lot of focus put on social media and the effect that it had on the election, right?
Absolutely.
So you had, and there was a study that it was done, I believe it was done by hopefully somebody will correct me later on down the road if I'm wrong, but I believe it was the University of Georgia that did a study where they had been sweeping Twitter feeds forever, right? And they had been basically just sweeping all of that data. And then they went back into the data after the elections, and they were doing all this kind of analysis stuff, and they were able to see that it was essentially coming from a handful of organizations on either side, right?
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of them were coming from European countries, South American countries, mostly a particular Eastern European country, you know, was flooding social media with, you know, and what was interesting was that the same organizations would be putting messages on either side, right? Such that you could see that like there were opposing political messages not coming from the same accounts, but essentially coming from the same organization, such that what it appeared to be what they were doing was just trying to create a divide, right? Trying to increase the dissonance, you know, kind of cognitive dissonance between the two between the two parties. And what I was kind of wondering about as far as the, just as far from a technical, what are they doing when they're sweeping the data? How are they analyzing? Do you have any indication as to how you would analyze data like that to come to such a conclusion?
A little bit, not enough to talk super clear on. If I was going to do it, obviously there's IP, things you can track around that, and there's like language styles. So if these are being done by 50 people at a farm and wherever, you can do the tools now for doing the language analysis to tell that those 10,000 tweets were not really coming from 10,000 different people because the language styling is so similar. That becomes a little bit easier to do. Past that, the deep kind of detective work on that, I'm sure they have tools that I'm not aware of.
So the language analysis, that'd be an AI tool of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've heard of GPT-3 is a popular term, the last couple of years, Elon Musk's like a giant language model. So the technology has been getting much, much better. And it's getting to the point now where these models can write articles that are very difficult to distinguish that a human wrote on command. You can ask, write me an article about the Bush presidency in 2000 and whatever, and it spits out 2,000 words. You can ask it, make me a picture of a cat in the style of Picasso. It spits it out. Like, these things are getting absolutely amazing. And
wow, the
issue for this on the deep fake world is it's coming fast, and it's so my background sort of in machine learning, and this is progressing much faster than anyone knows, and the technology is being employed to a lot of these kind of I would suspect for a lot of these kind of Twitter farms, they're not people anymore, they are ML, because they can obviously generate them cheaper and faster and change the topics and then respond to how much outrage there is to adjust what they're going to say. So these things are getting very powerful very quickly. Their ability to produce text in different styles. So I don't know if you ever saw the apps where it would like stylize your photo. Mm-hmm. You take a photo, it'd be a Picasso or it'd be a water painting. So that stylization technology is in every aspect of state-of-the-art machine learning now. And so the idea of saying, I want an article about this in the form of a scientific paper, right? There is research on that now. Now those tools are so advanced that they're not just open source. You can download them and anyone can use them with the click of a button. These are people at MIT that have built them, and it's kind of a pain to use. But in 5 years, you'll be able to say, give me a credible sounding academic paper that says that climate change isn't real. And not only will it produce a paper that has an abstract and has graphs and has text, but it will pull from real data, right? It's not just going to make up numbers. It's going to find from data sources temperature readings that make its case properly, right? In the same way that there's been issues with, I've got very frustrated with the CDC and with Fauci in the last 2 years, where they'll say, oh, there was a 90% spike in something somewhere, and then you go look up the raw data and you go, well, if you take a 2-week sliding window from exactly March 15th to exactly April 15th, it's this high, and everything else is like 50 times lower than that. And it's like, that they know that they were lying. But by using real data, it's true. So to bring it back to technology, one thing I think is going to be very important going forward, and something I'm talking with some clients about, is the data integrity around just the production of media in general. And so the classic example for this would be your phone or your camera would have a secure enclave in it, which many of them do. Like iPhone has secure enclave for your Face ID stuff, in which the raw data. Most cameras have like a raw mode. If you're a journalist, you turn this on, and the raw data from the photo, before any processing by the neural engine of the phone or by the image processor in the camera, would get kind of hashed and tagged and sent out to a ledger, like Hedera. And that would have to be very cheap to make people say, well, okay, it's going to cost me like $2 a month for like 20,000 pictures. If I'm a journalist, I need to be able to prove later in court of law or in articles when people call me on it that this photo wasn't made by a machine. It wasn't generated by an AI. Like, my camera, it still could be a lie, right? I could take a picture of a nice old lady saying, yay, go America. And over there is like cities burning down, right? But at least I was at that location. The Sony XMR was pointing in that direction. It did capture those pixels, and that at least can be attested to. And that's going to have to permeate through basically all media, through posting of papers, through articles, through, right? Everyone's going to have to build a reputation around, I posted this article and here's the hash and it got logged. And in order as a way to fight against that this was not like deep faked. Because I mean, it's scary. Like I've seen some state of the art stuff, some stuff's not even published yet, you know, like it's got some friends that work on this. And, you know, I've seen some videos of, you know, when I'm looking, you know, of someone who didn't say something, a video of them with their mouth moving and their face moving, saying something in their voice, and it's completely generated. And it's generated on what was 4 or 5 years ago, 3-4 years ago, was you needed 1,000 hours of Joe Rogan talking to get the Joe Rogan voice right. Right. And now you need 6 minutes of Joe Rogan talking to get the Joe Rogan voice right. Right. So the idea that I could take that from this conversation alone, you'd be able to reproduce my face, reproduce my animations, reproduce my voice style, and likely even reproduce my talking style in terms of, you know, the kind of words that I use, to an approximation for which it would be unreasonable to expect anyone to be able to tell the difference if they weren't doing a forensic analysis. That is coming very soon. Right. That will be here. That will be in the hands of script kiddies, you know, in 5 years, and it'll be in apps in 10 or 12 years.
Right.
So the idea of having to have a kind of log as a journalist or as a reporter that this is my key, you know, it's my key. It doesn't matter who I am, but it matters that I haven't been caught pumping out deepfakes for 15 years or 10 years or 3 years or however many posts or whatever, and that I'm attesting to anything signed with my key is from me. And if it's not, because someone came and beat me up and took my key or whatever, those are things that happen. But that's going to be like a pretty large cost to pay in terms of, as you guys know, just kind of getting a new crypto key and getting your reputation back is going to be a lengthy process. It's not something you're going to be able to do overnight. So I see this as being a massive problem, and it's kind of one that that it requires some integration to really make it work. Requires some integration with the hardware people that are making these chips. But there are ways you can bring this to the current media landscape, which is things like you could make a system for which it's like a one-line JavaScript to plug into your website, and every time you post an article, it hashes that article and logs it. Let's say with HTS somewhere, so that you can tell the world you're not stealthily modifying the articles. Right. Because this happens all over the time now. New York Times, CNN, everybody, they post an article. They make an edit. They don't say there's an edit. They write something inflammatory. They pull it back. They don't put a disclaimer. They don't put a star. And it's getting even worse where they're starting to take articles that have more mainstream appeal, getting them trending on like Facebook, for example, keeping the metadata for the title as being the title they originally used, and then changing the title and the article, keeping the link to now something that's going to propagate the kind of propaganda that they want to push around whatever more divisive issue there is. And now Facebook thinks this has already been shared by 10,000 people. They now share it to 80,000 people. Right. So this is, and things like the Wayback Machine are kind of trying to do this, on the back end and say, let's just keep track of these major articles and who changes. But I want to reach a point where it's so easy for people to add this kind of trust themselves that you have to question, okay, you don't have to add this, but why don't you want me to know if you're going to change your article surreptitiously? I know it'll cost you 100th of a cent. I know that that's only going to cost you $3 a month at the New York Times, but you're not willing to do that? Why is that? Right. So I want the burden to be on the, to force people to make decisions. And now that they know people are going to notice the change, that will hopefully make them at least have to lie a little bit about why they did it and specifying it and putting the edit in, right? And so it's kind of those baby steps around putting yourself in positions where you won't be able to get away with a lie because there's no one on your CTO team or your sysadmin team that can go delete a record from a database, right?
Boy, we're really going to have to stay ahead of the curve, though. I mean, you're talking about baby steps, but meanwhile, some of these tools are going to be in the hands of developers within, they're already in the advanced hands. So, it's like, gosh, the question becomes, are the baby steps going to be enough? I guess we have to hope that technologies like Hedera Hashgraph are going to be able to keep us ahead of the curve. I'm actually going to have to go ahead and wrap this one up. So I'm going to thank you, Braden, for taking time out of your day and being here. I always have a lot of fun doing these. Ken, it's awesome to see you, buddy. Sorry we didn't get much of a chance to talk. I've got to run off. I've got to pick up my kid. You're on mute, buddy. But
it's just great to see you guys. We'll talk later at another time.
Awesome. It's good seeing your face, brother.
Just wanted to send my love to you guys, man. Hope you guys are
thanks,
doing great.
Ken. Thanks, man. And Braden, yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. We do this every month. So for the folks, Dell, Henry, Lou, thank you for joining us. Normally these are on these normally are on the first Monday of the month, but it's been the past few months, it's been kind of off. And I think it's going to be off next month because I think we're going to do a middle of the month. We're going to do kind of a Hedera holidays thing. So hopefully all you guys will come back and hang out and, wear your ugly sweaters and bring your stupid Santa hat or whatever it is. And, and a little a hot toddy or a cold beer or something, and we'll all chat. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. This is my name's Jeremy Fletcher. I'm with Ledgerama, and we've been talking about trust in media. The goal over here at Ledgerama is to build trust online on the trust layer of the internet, Hedera Hashgraph. So again, thanks everybody for being here. This has been hosted by Creative Coast out of Savannah, Georgia. Creative Coast is here to create, code, and collide. Check them out. Oh, Braden, real quick, before I sign off for good, is there any materials or anything that you recommend, websites or books or anything that you recommend folks check out in order to kind of catch up on some of the technology and some of the ideas that we've gone over?
I would say the best thing would be to Google around for deepfakes and just find some Medium articles and just get some examples of, because there's a bunch now that people have posted and saying, hey, this video isn't Joe Rogan saying this. And I think that the first time, and you'll see some that are very low quality and some that are a little higher quality, but I think just think about, movie special effects, video game special effects, where they were 10 years ago, and just know that there is no one who's going to be able to tell on their own that these things are fake. Right.
Yeah, so, it's a real problem, and we've got to combat it. I mean, for the sake of humanity. I mean, really, it's one of those things. Deep fakes. I mean, not being able to trust media is a huge issue, and I think we feel that pain deeply in the United States.